In the autumn of 1823, the quiet farming town of Chillicothe, Ohio, was shaken by a case so disturbing that it would echo through generations. At its center was a 19-year-old woman named Margaret Hale, the daughter of a respected blacksmith. What began as a simple illness soon spiraled into something so grotesque that 3 separate doctors refused to treat her, each man leaving her bedside pale, shaken, and unwilling to ever speak of what they had seen. Margaret's decline began innocently enough. A fever, dizziness, and fainting spells. Nothing uncommon in a rural community familiar with harsh winters and poor sanitation. But within weeks, her symptoms grew stranger. She awoke in the night screaming, clawing at her skin as though something moved beneath it. Neighbors who visited swore her eyes looked sunken yet wide, darting toward corners where no one stood. Her mother described nights where Margaret spoke in a low, rasping voice that sounded nothing like her own. The family's first physician fled after only minutes at her bedside. He later confessed, in hushed tones, that when he tried to examine her pulse, Margaret's hand snapped to his wrist with such unnatural strength that he could not pry himself free. The second doctor declared her case beyond mortal aid and warned the family not to seek him again. The third, an older man who had survived years treating soldiers of the War of 1812, simply left without a word, refusing even to take payment. For 3 trained men to abandon her was unheard of, and it terrified the Hale family. As the weeks passed, Margaret's body twisted in ways her bones should not have allowed. Witnesses swore they saw her spine bow so sharply that her shoulders nearly touched the back of her head. On some nights, her screams were joined by guttural growls, sounds so inhuman that neighbors gathered outside the house with lanterns, too afraid to enter but unwilling to abandon the family inside. Rumors spread quickly, whispers of possession, of witchcraft, of a punishment from God himself. Desperate, the family turned to faith. A preacher was brought to recite scripture at her bedside, but Margaret ripped the Bible from his hands, throwing it into the fire with a strength that left the men in the room speechless. She then whispered names, neighbors, friends, even children, some of whom would fall ill within weeks. For the townsfolk, this was proof she was cursed. Mothers began forbidding their children from walking past the Hale home. By late October, her condition reached its peak. One stormy night, her younger brother claimed to have seen her standing at the family's well, though she had been bedridden for months. Her nightdress clung to her body, soaked in rain, as she turned toward him with a slow, deliberate movement. In a voice that was not her own, she whispered, "You shouldn't be here." Terrified, the boy fled, and for years he refused to speak of what happened afterward. Margaret died only days later. Unlike the violence of her illness, her death was eerily quiet. But when her coffin was later opened for burial, horror struck again. Her fingertips were torn and bloodied, and the inside of the wooden box was scratched deeply, as though she had tried to claw her way out. Whether she had been buried alive or something darker had taken place, no one could agree. The Hale family, disgraced and haunted, eventually left Ohio altogether. And so, the story of Margaret Hale closes as one of the darkest chapters in early Ohio history. A case that began as a simple fever grew into something so grotesque that even trained physicians, the very men sworn to preserve life, refused to stand at her bedside. What did they see in her that shook them so deeply? Was it an illness that medical science of the time could not yet understand? Or was it something far more sinister, something that still defies explanation 200 years later? Some believe Margaret suffered from a rare neurological disorder, her body convulsing and twisting in ways the townsfolk could only interpret as possession. Others whisper that she had been cursed, her family punished for sins never spoken aloud. And then there are those who insist it was neither sickness nor curse, but a darkness that chose her, an entity that wore her body like a shell until it was finished with her. But the truth may never be known. Margaret's story remains buried in local legend, her name carried only in fragments, her memory bound to a farmhouse long gone and a well that still draws wary glances on stormy nights. One thing is certain, even after her death, the fear she inspired did not end. To this day, locals say that when lightning cracks across the Ohio sky, a pale figure can sometimes be seen standing at the hail land, her dress clinging wet against her frame, her eyes hollow and unblinking. So what do you think? Was Margaret the victim of a tragic medical mystery that her era could not comprehend? Was she a young woman consumed by madness and superstition? Or was she something far more terrifying? Proof that there are forces among us that science will never explain? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story unsettled you as much as it did us, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and share it with those who dare to wander into the darker corners of history.